Imagine a place so strategically important that its fate is debated daily in the highest corridors of power. A location where a single miscalculation could send shockwaves across the entire globe, disrupting economies and challenging global stability. This is not a fictional scenario from a political thriller, it is the constant, simmering reality of the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, this sliver of ocean is barely 33 kilometers wide. Yet through this incredibly confined space, a torrent of the world's most essential commodity flows every single day. It is a lifeline for modern civilization, a conveyor belt for the black gold that fuels our industries, heats our homes, and powers our transportation. This narrow passage is more than just a shipping lane. It is a geopolitical fault line. On one side, the Islamic Republic of Iran, a nation with immense regional influence and a complex relationship with the West. On the other, Oman and the United Arab Emirates, key players in the Arabian Peninsula's intricate political landscape. Superpowers watch this waterway with an eagle-eyed focus, their navies patrolling its waters, their satellites scrutinizing every movement from above. The air is thick with tension, a palpable sense of high stakes where massive oil tankers, the behemoths of modern commerce, navigate under the constant, silent shadow of advanced missile systems and fast-attack naval craft. The sheer volume of trade passing through this choke point is staggering. Every day, approximately 1/5 of the world's total oil consumption, translating to millions of barrels, makes its journey through these contested waters. This isn't just about crude oil. A significant portion of the world's liquefied natural gas also depends on this route. For nations from Asia to Europe, the uninterrupted flow of energy from the Persian Gulf is not a luxury, but a necessity. The economies of industrial giants like China, Japan, India, and South Korea are intricately tethered to the safe passage of vessels through this very strait. Therefore, the Strait of Hormuz is not simply another waterway on the world map. It is the jugular vein of the global economy. It is a theater where decades of history, deep-seated rivalries, and the thirst for energy converge in a dramatic and often dangerous display. The constant presence of military hardware, from aircraft carriers to stealth submarines, serves as a stark reminder of its importance. This is a place where one mistake, one misunderstanding, or one deliberate act of aggression could ignite a crisis with far-reaching consequences, plunging the world into a state of economic and political turmoil not seen in generations. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, one of the world's most critical locations. It's the only maritime exit for major oil producers, making it a vital, vulnerable choke point for global energy. Every day, supertankers navigate this tight corridor, where even a single disruption could trigger a global crisis. For the majority of human history, the Strait of Hormuz was a regional waterway, important for local trade and pearl diving, but hardly a concern for the wider world. That all changed dramatically in the 20th century with the discovery and commercialization of a single resource: oil. This thick black liquid would go on to fundamentally reshape human civilization. It powered the engines of the Industrial Revolution, fueled the rise of the automobile, enabled the age of air travel, and became the lifeblood of modern warfare. As the world's appetite for petroleum grew exponentially, the vast, untapped reserves of the Middle East came into sharp focus. Suddenly, the geography of the Persian Gulf region was no longer a matter of local interest. It became a subject of intense global strategic obsession. The Strait of Hormuz transformed from a simple maritime route into a symbol of immense power and influence. By the mid-20th century, as Western economies became increasingly dependent on imported oil, a terrifying realization began to dawn upon policymakers and military planners. If this single narrow waterway were to be blocked, even for a short period, It could paralyze significant portions of the global economy, bringing industry and transportation to a grinding halt. This fear was no longer theoretical by the 1970s. The oil shocks of that decade provided a harsh and unforgettable lesson in the fragility of global energy supplies. When Arab oil-producing nations imposed an embargo, the world witnessed firsthand how disruptions in the Middle East could trigger economic chaos thousands of miles away. Long lines formed at gas stations, fuel prices surged to unprecedented levels, and governments across the globe scrambled to manage the resulting inflation and economic recession. From that moment on, the concept of energy security became inextricably linked to the stability and openness of the Strait of Hormuz. Today, the anachronistic dependence on this single choke point persists, perhaps even more acutely. Oil does not just fuel our cars, it is the foundation of our entire globalized system. It powers the factories that produce our goods, fuels the ships and planes that transport them, and is essential for the fertilizers that grow our food. The intricate supply chains that define modern life are all predicated on the availability of affordable energy. Consequently, even a rumor of instability in or around the Strait of Hormuz can cause oil prices to spike on global markets, demonstrating the incredible and disproportionate influence this small waterway wields over the world's economic well-being. For decades, military analysts, economists, and political leaders have been haunted by one terrifying possibility. A question that looms over global politics like a persistent storm cloud. It is a scenario so dire that its potential consequences are almost unthinkable, yet it must be constantly considered and planned for. The question is simple, but its implications are profound and far-reaching. What happens if the Strait of Hormuz closes? This is not merely a hypothetical exercise. It is a scenario that has been threatened, simulated, and narrowly avoided on multiple occasions throughout recent history. A full or even partial closure of this vital artery would not be a minor disruption. It would be a global cataclysm. The immediate and most predictable consequence would be a dramatic and violent surge in oil prices. Global markets despise uncertainty, and no event could create more uncertainty than the sudden removal of 20% of the world's oil supply. Prices could double or even triple overnight, unleashing a wave of economic panic. For nations that are heavily reliant on imported energy, the effects would be devastating. Fuel shortages would become a real possibility, the cost of transportation would skyrocket, and the specter of runaway inflation would threaten to destabilize entire economies, from the most developed nations to the most fragile emerging markets. However, the impact would extend far beyond the price at the pump or the numbers on a stock ticker. Our modern world is a complex, interconnected machine, and affordable energy is the lubricant that keeps its gears turning. Factories would face soaring operational costs, potentially leading to shutdowns and job losses. The cost of shipping goods would escalate, making everything from electronics to food more expensive for consumers. Airlines would be forced to raise ticket prices or cut routes, crippling both tourism and international business. The ripple effects would cascade through every sector of the economy, potentially triggering a severe global recession. Beyond the economic chaos, the closure of the strait would almost certainly precipitate a major geopolitical crisis, potentially leading to armed conflict. The United States and other major global powers have long declared that keeping the Strait of Hormuz open is a vital national security interest. A deliberate attempt to block it would be seen as an act of aggression, one that could provoke a swift and overwhelming military response. The Persian Gulf, already one of the most militarized regions on the planet, could quickly become a battlefield, drawing in multiple nations and creating a conflict with unpredictable and catastrophic outcomes for the entire world. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow channel separating Iran from Oman's Musandam Peninsula, a vital maritime passage connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. It funnels massive energy exports, making it a global choke point and a hotspot for geopolitical tension. Today, Hormuz is synonymous with oil, supertankers, and the constant hum of international rivalry. The Persian Gulf is home to the world's most productive oil and gas reserves. For Gulf nations, the Strait of Hormuz is their only maritime gateway, an economic lifeline. Every day, massive tankers carry energy that powers Asia, Europe, and America through this narrow choke point. A single disruption here could trigger a global crisis, making the Strait of Hormuz a matter of urgent international security. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow, high-stakes corridor where massive oil tankers navigate tight lanes, watched by military forces on rugged coastlines. Here, the margin for error is razor-thin, and a single mishap could ripple across the globe, turning every passage into a tense exercise in brinkmanship. The Strait of Hormuz is a tense front line, bordered by Iran to the north and Oman and the UAE to the south. Here, rival navies patrol close together, creating a permanent standoff. Iran's control and military presence give it leverage, while Oman and the UAE, backed by Western allies, ensure the strait remains a potential flashpoint. For centuries, the Strait of Hormuz was a quiet trade route, its significance tied to spices and silk. But everything changed with the discovery of oil. Black gold erupted from the Middle East, transforming the region into the epicenter of a new global economy. The sleepy waters of the strait became the world's vital oil artery, its destiny forever changed. As the 20th century progressed, oil became the world's lifeblood. The Strait of Hormuz, once remote, turned into a vital artery for global trade, with supertankers carrying the aspirations of an interconnected world. Its narrow waters became a daily parade of industrial might, making the strait a symbol of immense strategic value and global interdependence. In the 1970s, the Strait of Hormuz became a geopolitical weapon as oil producers used embargoes to send shockwaves through the global economy, exposing the West's vulnerability and forever tying energy security to this narrow choke point. The rise of oil wealth transformed Gulf nations into global power players, making the Strait of Hormuz a focal point of U.S. security policy and a symbol of how energy dependency reshaped the world's balance of power. Iran's control of the strait's northern shore gives it unmatched leverage, allowing Tehran to threaten global oil flows and assert its influence in regional and international affairs. Unable to match Western navies conventionally, Iran relies on asymmetric tactics, swarm boats, missiles, mines, and coastal defenses to make any attempt to control the strait costly and unpredictable. By wielding the threat of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran turns geography into geopolitical leverage, using military drills and targeted actions to keep the world on edge and maintain its bargaining power. The IRGC Navy dominates the Strait of Hormuz, using fast attack boats and swarm tactics to maintain a constant, unpredictable presence. Their decentralized, highly motivated forces operate from hidden bases, making them elusive and persistent. Encounters with U.S. warships are frequent, and a single miscalculation could escalate rapidly. Understanding the IRGC's role is key to grasping the region's volatility. In the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War spilled into the Persian Gulf, turning vital shipping lanes into a battlefield. Oil tankers became targets, and the tanker war threatened the world's energy supply. Fast boats, mines, and airstrikes made every voyage through the Strait of Hormuz a gamble for civilian crews. The Gulf, once a symbol of commerce, became a war zone. As the tanker war raged, the Persian Gulf became one of the world's most dangerous waters. Over 400 ships were attacked, with devastating consequences for crews and global oil markets. Tankers ablaze, crews fighting for survival. Every ship was a target, no matter its flag. The tanker war proved that the flow of oil is not a right, but a privilege that can vanish in an instant. As attacks on shipping escalated, the world's superpowers could no longer ignore the crisis. The U.S., alarmed by threats to oil and Soviet moves in the Gulf, reflagged Kuwaiti tankers and launched Operation Earnest Will, sending warships to protect vital oil routes. The risk of direct confrontation between the U.S. and Iran grew with every tense convoy through these perilous waters. The American intervention in the tanker war pushed the region to the brink of a wider conflict. In April 1988, the USS Samuel B. Roberts struck an Iranian mine, leading to Operation Praying Mantis, the largest U.S. naval battle since World War II. Months later, the USS Vincennes shot down Iran Air Flight 655, killing 290 civilians, a tragedy that remains a deep wound in U.S.-Iranian relations. The Strait of Hormuz is vital to the world's energy flow, and its security is guarded by the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. Based in Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet deters aggression and ensures freedom of navigation in these volatile waters. Centered around powerful carrier strike groups, their presence is a strong deterrent, maintaining stability and protecting global trade. Securing the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a U.S. mission. A coalition of navies, including the UK, France, and others, patrols these vital waters, sharing resources and intelligence. Their united presence deters threats, protects global shipping, and signals that any attack here is an affront to the entire international community. The protection of the Strait of Hormuz is not just about warships on the surface. It is also a battle fought in the domains of information and technology. A vast and sophisticated network of surveillance assets provides an unseen shield, monitoring every movement in and around the strait, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This multi-layered intelligence gathering operation is crucial for providing early warning of potential threats, allowing naval forces to position themselves preemptively and respond more effectively to crises. A key element of this network is satellite reconnaissance. High-resolution imaging and signals intelligence satellites constantly pass over the region, tracking vessel movements, monitoring activity at Iranian naval bases, and listening in on communications. At a lower altitude, a fleet of manned and unmanned aircraft provides persistent, real-time surveillance. Long-endurance patrol aircraft, like the P-8 Poseidon, equipped with advanced radar, cameras, and sensors, can patrol for hours on end, building a detailed picture of the maritime environment. Increasingly, this role is being taken over by sophisticated drones, such as the High-Altitude Global Hawk and the Sea-Scanning Triton. These unmanned platforms can stay aloft for over 24 hours, feeding live video and sensor data back to command centers across the globe. This constant aerial overwatch makes it incredibly difficult for any force to assemble or maneuver without being detected. On the surface and beneath it, technology plays an equally vital role. The warships and command centers in the region are linked by secure data networks that allow them to share a common operating picture, fusing data from satellites, aircraft, and their own powerful shipboard sensors. Advanced radar systems can track hundreds of targets simultaneously, distinguishing between commercial traffic and potential threats like fast attack craft or low-flying missiles. Sonar systems on ships and submarines listen for the telltale acoustic signature of enemy vessels. This fusion of information is what enables commanders to make sense of a crowded and complex battle space, separating the signal from the noise. Furthermore, the commercial shipping industry itself has become a part of this security network. All large commercial vessels are required to use the Automatic Identification System, or AIS, a transponder that constantly broadcasts the ship's identity, position, course, and speed. While this system is designed for collision avoidance, it also allows naval forces to track and identify every legitimate vessel in the strait, making it easier to spot anomalies or vessels that have turned off their transponders, often a sign of illicit activity. This technological web, from space to the seabed, creates a level of transparency that acts as a powerful deterrent, reinforcing the physical presence of the naval fleets. Maintaining this constant, high-tech vigil over the Strait of Hormuz comes at an enormous cost, measured not only in dollars, but also in diplomatic and operational resources. The financial burden of deploying and sustaining a major naval presence thousands of miles from home is staggering. An aircraft carrier strike group, for example, costs billions of dollars to build and has daily operating costs that run into the millions. The fuel, maintenance, munitions, and personnel costs for an entire fleet operating year-round in a demanding environment represent a significant and ongoing drain on the defense budgets of the United States and its allies, diverting resources that could be used for other priorities. Beyond the direct financial costs, the mission exacts a heavy toll on personnel and equipment. The hot, corrosive saltwater environment of the Persian Gulf is exceptionally harsh on ships and aircraft, leading to accelerated wear and tear and requiring more frequent and expensive maintenance cycles. For the sailors, the constant high alert, the long deployments away from their families, and the inherent danger of operating in a potential flashpoint zone create significant psychological and physical stress. The operational tempo is relentless, placing a continuous strain on the readiness and morale of the forces tasked with this critical, never-ending mission. The shipping industry also bears a significant portion of the cost of security. Even during periods of relative calm, insurance premiums for vessels transiting the strait include a war risk surcharge. When tensions flare, these premiums can skyrocket, adding millions of dollars to the cost of a single voyage. These costs are inevitably passed down the supply chain, first to the oil companies and refiners, and ultimately to consumers at the gas pump and in their energy bills. Some shipping companies also invest in onboard security measures, such as hiring private armed guards or implementing defensive vessel hardening, adding another layer of expense to their operations. Finally, there is a significant diplomatic and political cost. The heavy Western military presence in the region is a source of friction and is often used by Iran and other actors as a propaganda tool, portraying it as a form of imperial occupation. It complicates diplomatic efforts and can be a point of contention even with allies. Every decision to deploy more forces or to respond to a provocation must be carefully weighed against the risk of unintended escalation. The high cost of protecting the strait is a clear illustration of just how critical this waterway is to the global economy, a price the world has, so far, been willing to pay to prevent a far greater catastrophe. If the Strait of Hormuz closed, global markets would erupt in panic. Oil prices could double or triple instantly, stock markets would plunge, and governments would scramble to respond. Emergency reserves would be released, but they're only a temporary buffer. For ordinary people, the impact would be immediate. Long lines at gas stations and non-stop crisis news. If the Strait of Hormuz closed, the global supply chain would seize up, halting international commerce. Factories would stop, shipping costs would soar, and goods would vanish from shelves. Food and energy prices would spike, hitting the world's poorest hardest. A supply chain seizure is a seizure of the global economy itself. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz would trigger economic chaos and rapid geopolitical escalation. The U.S. and its allies would see this as an act of war, responding with military force to reopen the waterway. Iran would retaliate, targeting U.S. forces and Gulf infrastructure, risking a wider regional conflict with devastating global consequences. Even if the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, the world won't return to normal. The conflict would leave deep scars with destroyed oil infrastructure and a lasting risk premium on energy. Global prices would soar, supply chains would fracture, and the era of cheap, abundant energy would end, ushering in a poorer, more dangerous world. The Strait of Hormuz has long been a vulnerable choke point for Gulf oil exports. To bypass this risk, nations like the UAE and Saudi Arabia built massive pipelines across deserts, reaching ports outside the strait. These projects are more than infrastructure. They're strategic moves, giving Gulf states alternative export routes and reducing dependence on a single, fragile passage. Pipelines offer hope for energy security, but their capacity is dwarfed by the sheer volume moving through the Strait of Hormuz each day. Even combined, pipelines can't replace the strait. They're a lifeline, not a solution. Vulnerable to sabotage and costly to build, pipelines face political and physical hurdles. For now, pipelines supplement but cannot substitute the strait's vital role. Despite billions spent on alternatives, the Strait of Hormuz remains irreplaceable. Its unmatched efficiency and scale make it the backbone of global oil trade. Every day, supertankers carry millions of barrels through this narrow waterway, something pipelines can't match. For decades to come, the world's economy will depend on the safe passage of ships through Hormuz. Once dominated by Western interests, the Strait of Hormuz is now crucial for Asia's booming economies. China, India, Japan, and South Korea depend on its energy flow for growth and stability. Today, Asian powers are active players in the region's security and politics. The strait sits at the heart of a new great game, shaping the destiny of the 21st century. China faces a double choke point dilemma. Most of its oil passes through both the Strait of Hormuz and the narrow Strait of Malacca, both policed by the U.S. Navy. This vulnerability drives China's rapid naval expansion and massive Belt and Road projects, like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor to Gwadar, aiming to secure its energy lifeline and reshape Asia's geopolitical map. For India, the Strait of Hormuz is vital. Most of its oil and gas imports pass through here, and millions of Indians work in the Gulf. India can't view the region from afar. It must balance ties with Iran, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and the US. India's growing naval presence and strategic investments make it a direct competitor to China in the Indian Ocean. The Strait of Hormuz remains the world's most critical energy choke point. Despite growth in renewables, global demand for oil and gas keeps this narrow waterway vital and volatile. As nations shift to cleaner fuels, LNG exports through Hormuz only add to its importance. For now, the world's energy, economies, and anxieties still converge here. The choke point endures. The global shift to renewables casts a long shadow over the Strait of Hormuz. As oil demand falls, the region faces economic and political upheaval. Producer states may become more volatile, even tempted to use the strait as leverage. The race is on. Can Gulf nations diversify before oil's decline triggers crisis? The outcome will shape the future stability of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz will remain a place of fragile balance, where rivalries, shifting alliances, and new technologies collide. As the world's oil flows increasingly to Asia, new powers like China and India will shape its future security. The fate of the global economy will still depend on the safe passage of ships through this narrow, contested waterway. The Strait of Hormuz, just a narrow passage, holds immense power over the world. Here, global economics and energy flow through a fragile bottleneck, shaping history and fueling constant tension. As long as the world needs oil, this strait will remain a critical, vulnerable lifeline, reminding us how geography still shapes our destiny. The Strait of Hormuz is more than an energy lifeline. It's a barometer of global health. Tensions here reflect the state of international relations, with every naval patrol and diplomatic move watched worldwide. Its stability signals the health of the global order, making Hormuz a mirror for our world's rivalries and dependencies. As our documentary concludes, it is tempting to search for a final resolution, a neat ending to the dramatic story of the Strait of Hormuz. But the defining characteristic of this story is that it has no end. The future of this waterway will be a continuation of its past, a perpetual state of fragile balance, managed crisis, and constant vigilance. The players may change, the technologies of war may evolve, and the world's energy mix may shift. But the fundamental dynamics of the strait, its geographical importance and its political volatility, are set to endure for generations to come. The narrative of Hormuz is not a closed loop. It is a continuous, unfolding drama that will be a central feature of the 21st century. Perhaps one day, in a distant future, the world will have fully transitioned to renewable energy. Electric vehicles will have replaced the internal combustion engine, and power will be generated locally from the sun and the wind. In such a world, the flow of oil from the Persian Gulf might finally cease, and the supertankers could become relics of a bygone era. On that day, the Strait of Hormuz might finally revert to being a simple regional waterway, its geopolitical significance fading into the pages of history books. This is the ultimate hope, the long-term solution to the problem of Hormuz. But that day is not today, and it will not be tomorrow. For the foreseeable future, the world remains deeply connected to this narrow passage. Every tanker that safely navigates its waters is a testament to a fragile international system that, for all its flaws, has so far managed to prevent the ultimate catastrophe. It is a victory for the thousands of sailors, diplomats, and military personnel who work, often unseen, to maintain this delicate balance. Their work is a quiet, daily struggle to keep the arteries of the global economy open, to manage tensions, and to pull the world back from the brink. The Strait of Hormuz is therefore a story of human interdependence on a global scale. It demonstrates that the fuel in our cars, the prices in our stores, and the stability of our economies are all linked in a direct and unbroken chain back to this single passage of water. It is a powerful reminder that in our interconnected world, we are all in the same boat, navigating the same treacherous waters. And few places on Earth prove that truth more clearly, or more dramatically, than the waterway that controls the world, the Strait of Hormuz.